From now on, I want your paycheck sent to my account, Logan said, leaning in like he was doing me a favor. It's for your own good. He said it slow, like I didn't speak English. Like 61 years of balancing hospital registries and rent hadn't taught me arithmetic. The kitchen clock ticked behind him, the only sound in the room that still belonged to me. Sarah stood by the archway with her arms crossed and a tight smile that had learned how to pass as kind. I stared at my son, at this man I'd raised alone after his father walked out, searching his face for some trace of the boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard. Instead, I saw only certainty, the steady gaze of someone who believed he was entitled to my labor, even now. So I nodded slowly, told him I'd sleep on it, and watched relief wash over his features as he patted my hand. We'll start the paperwork Monday, Sarah added, sliding a stack of power of attorney documents across my table like a dinner bill. This will make everything so much easier. Friday evening came, 6 o'clock, our ritual. They'd come over expecting catfish and cornbread, expecting to drop laundry in my machine, expecting, as always, to be received. But when Logan and Sarah turned the key and pushed the door in, their voices ricocheted into a silence I had staged on purpose. Then came the scream, Sarah's high and startled, bouncing off walls that no longer held photographs or memories. I sat quietly in my kitchen chair, waiting. Logan burst in, eyes wide. "Ma, what happened?" he demanded, like it was his house. "Where is everything?" "Sold," I said, "or given away." Sarah appeared behind him, blinking. "You sold your things without telling us?" "My things," I repeated, not unkindly. "My choice." The color drained from Logan's face, then rushed back in a flush that climbed his neck. He stepped forward, fists clenching and unclenching. "You can't just, we were going to—" His voice hardened. "You should have consulted me first." I saw him then, not my child, but a grown man who'd stayed rent-free until 31, who'd come every week to eat my food and use my washer, who now wanted my paycheck. A stranger wearing my son's face. "Where are we supposed to sit when we come over?" he asked, gesturing at the empty living room. "How are we going to watch the game this Sunday?" There it was not concern for where I would sleep, but for his own comfort in a space that wasn't his. The kitchen clock kept ticking, marking seconds of clarity. Sarah stepped forward. "After everything we've done," she said, "checking on you every week, making sure you're not alone. This is selfish, Veronica." Selfish. The word hung between us. Selfish after double shifts at the hospital for 30 years. After feeding everyone who came through my door. After letting Logan stack cash while I paid the bills. After wiping his tears and hers. After hosting their wedding shower. After co-signing their mortgage. "I think," Logan said, his voice dropping low, "this proves why we need to manage things for you. You're clearly not making rational decisions anymore." I rose then, straightening my back against the weight of decades. "There's no dinner tonight," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I won't be signing those papers on Monday." Logan's jaw tightened. "Be careful, Ma," he said. "You're 61, living alone. Things happen to old ladies who don't have family looking after them." He paused. "I'm trying to protect you. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." They left in a flurry of slammed doors and muttered accusations. The house creaked in their wake, settling into silence around me. I sank back into my chair, the empty rooms around me no longer echoing with voices or demands. What I felt wasn't grief or regret. It was something cleaner, sharper, certainty. The absolute knowledge that my son saw me not as a person but as a resource. Meals, laundry, checks, signatures. In the bare living room, the afternoon light cast no shadows. I reached for my phone and found 2 names I'd saved earlier that week. Sophie from the church thrift store and Anthony, a lawyer my friend Andrew from the hospital had recommended. Emptying my house wasn't about the cash, it was about the echo. The weekend stretched before me, quiet in a way my home hadn't been in years. I'd slept on an air mattress. Sophie had insisted I take "just until you decide," she'd said, though we both knew I had already decided. Saturday morning, I made coffee in a pot that had survived the purge and sat at my kitchen table with the power of attorney papers Logan and Sarah had left behind. The document was 8 pages of legal language, dense with phrases that circled around a single truth. If I signed, I would be handing over control of everything I'd built. My bank accounts, my medical decisions, my house, the one I'd made payments on for 27 years. The power to speak for me if I couldn't speak for myself. The right to decide what happened to my body and my belongings when I was gone. I traced my finger over the signature line, blank and waiting. How many papers had I signed for Logan over the years? Permission slips for field trips. His first car loan when he was 19. The rental agreement when he moved into his first apartment at 22. My name as guarantor because his credit wasn't established yet. I will not sign power of attorney, I said to the empty kitchen. The clock ticked in response, steady and impartial. I said it again, louder this time. I will not sign power of attorney. My phone buzzed with a text from Logan. Mom, we need to talk about what happened. Sarah's upset. Call me. I set the phone face down on the table and got dressed. The church thrift store sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, a weathered brick building with windows covered in children's handprints. Sophie was sorting donations when I walked in, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. She smiled when she saw me. Veronica, how's it feeling with all that space? She asked, setting down a box of picture frames. Honest, I said. Empty, but honest. Sophie nodded, understanding more than I'd said. She'd been there when my husband left, when Logan was 11 and asking too many questions I couldn't answer. She'd watched me hold the line for 2 decades after that. Those end tables sold already, she said, leading me to the back room. And that beautiful dining set the Hendersons bought it for their daughter. Said it was exactly what they'd been looking for. I nodded, picturing the furniture in new homes, serving new purposes. It's good to know they'll be used. You keeping anything back for yourself? Sophie asked, not looking at me directly, sorting teacups with careful hands. Just what matters, I said. The clock, my mother's Bible, the quilt Zoe and I made that summer. Sophie smiled. Good choices. As I helped her arrange a rack of blouses, I remembered the lean years after Mark left, how I'd taken on evening shifts at the hospital records department, how I'd learned to stretch groceries across extra days, how I'd sewn patches on Logan's jeans until he outgrew them. All while Logan watched and learned. Or what? That his mother would always provide, no matter the cost to herself? He's been staying with you since college, hasn't he? Sophie asked, breaking into my thoughts. Until he was 31, I confirmed. Said he was stacking cash for a down payment. I didn't add that the down payment had come with my co-signature, or that I'd paid for the fence around their new yard, the one Sarah had posted about online with heart emojis and no mention of where the money came from. My phone buzzed again when I got home. Another text from Logan. We need to get these papers signed by Monday so we can help manage things. Sarah's concerned about your decision-making. This is serious, Mom. The clock ticked on the shelf, the only sound in my quiet kitchen. I thought about all the papers I'd signed over the years, all the times I'd said yes, because that's what mothers do. But this wasn't about being a mother anymore. This was about being Veronica Adams, a woman with her name on a mortgage and a life built from her own hands. I texted back, I'll see you Monday. He responded immediately. Good. We'll bring the notary. I didn't correct his assumption. Instead, I walked to my bedroom and pulled a manila envelope from the back of my closet, the one place I hadn't cleared out. Inside were bank statements going back 3 years, credit notices I'd set aside to ask about later, a collection letter I'd found tucked under the toaster. Papers with my name on them that somehow didn't feel like they belonged to me. Sunday night, I barely slept. The air mattress creaked with every turn, the empty rooms amplifying every sound. But when morning came, I dressed carefully. Blue blouse, gray slacks, sensible shoes. I tucked the manila envelope under my arm, locked my front door, and drove to the address Andrew had written on a hospital notepad for me. The law office of Anthony Diaz was on the 2nd floor of a converted Victorian downtown. As I climbed the stairs, the manila envelope seemed to grow heavier, and my stomach knotted with each step. But my voice, when I spoke to the receptionist, came out clear and certain. I'm Veronica Adams, I said. I have an appointment. Anthony Diaz wasn't what I'd expected. No expensive suit or intimidating desk, just a man in shirt sleeves with reading glasses perched on his nose, sitting at a table crowded with neat stacks of paper. He gestured to the chair across from him, and I sat, placing my manila envelope on the table between us. Andrew speaks highly of you, he said. Says you're the best records clerk the hospital has ever had. I nodded, uncertain whether to feel proud or exposed. Anthony's eyes were kind but calculating, the gaze of someone who spent his days untangling other people's messes. Let's start with what brought you here, he said, and I found myself telling him about the empty house, the power of attorney papers, Logan's demand for my paycheck. When I finished, Anthony nodded once. And you brought documents? I pushed the manila envelope toward him. Everything I could find that didn't make sense. Anthony opened the envelope and began arranging statements and notices in chronological order. His fingers moved with practiced precision, pausing occasionally to make a note. After several minutes, he tapped a highlighted line on my bank statement. This $1,200 cash withdrawal, he said. Gas station ATM on Riverside Drive. Did you make it? I leaned forward to look. No, I haven't been to that side of town in months. And your debit card? Anthony asked. It never left my wallet, I said, reaching into my purse to show him. Anthony made another note. Let's keep going. One by one, we unfolded a trail I hadn't known I was leaving. A credit card from Hammers & Home, with a $3,000 balance charges for tile bathroom fixtures, a riding mower. I'd never stepped foot in that store, never applied for that card. I can see Logan's backyard in these purchases, I said quietly, remembering the new patio he'd proudly shown me last summer, the gleaming mower he'd used to cut my grass once when he had time. Anthony nodded, continuing through the papers. There's more. This utility account new service for electricity. Address is. He squinted at the paper. 742 Cypress Avenue. That's not your address. It's Logan and Sarah's, I said, my throat tightening. But there are 2 late payments, Anthony said. It's dragging your credit score down. A sick feeling settled in my stomach as Anthony kept sorting. When he unfolded a letter from Apex Collections, I recognized it immediately, the one I'd found tucked under the toaster. The one with the threatening language and the phone number I'd been too afraid to call. A personal loan for $5,000, Anthony said, eyes moving across the page. Taken out 8 months ago from Quick Loan on Market Street. Do you remember applying for this? I shook my head. But a man named Steve keeps calling, says there are options for repayment. Anthony's pen tapped against his notepad. Mrs. Adams, this isn't a one-off. When we line up the dates, this is a pattern 3 years' worth of accounts and transactions in your name that you didn't authorize. He turned his notepad so I could see the running total he'd been keeping. $17,000. The number sat between us, breathing like a living thing. $17,000, almost a year's salary for me. Money that had flowed from my name to my son's life, without my knowledge or consent. I should have caught this sooner, I whispered, shame burning behind my eyes. I should have been paying attention. Financial abuse is designed to go undetected, Anthony said firmly, especially when it's perpetrated by family members. The question now is, what do you want to do about it? I stared at the papers spread across the table. My name signed in handwriting that wasn't quite mine. Bills for things I'd never bought. Debt I hadn't created. The shame began to harden into something else. Everything, I said. I want to do everything we can. Anthony nodded, turning to his computer. First steps. Dispute letters to all creditors. Fraud reports. Credit freeze. We'll need to secure your bank accounts, get new cards with new numbers, enable multi-factor authentication. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. What about Logan? I asked. Will he know? Eventually, Anthony said. The question is whether we handle this privately or make it a legal matter. Let's start with the disputes, I said. One step at a time. By noon, Anthony had drafted letters to the credit card company, the utility, and the loan agency. Each one stated in clear terms. These accounts were opened fraudulently. I did not authorize them. I am disputing these charges in their entirety. When he handed me the letters to sign, my hand trembled slightly. But as I wrote Veronica Adams on each signature line, my grip steadied. 3 years of fraud, but my name, my real signature, would be the one to end it. We'll send these certified mail, Anthony said, gathering the signed letters. Return receipt requested. Creates a paper trail. I need that, I said. A trail that belongs to me this time. Anthony looked at me over his glasses. You understand this is just the beginning? There will be investigations. They'll ask questions. They may want to speak with you directly. I nodded. I'm not afraid of questions anymore. As Anthony sealed the envelopes, I looked at the documents spread across the table, 3 years of violations laid bare under fluorescent lights. Each one a small wound, a paper cut that hadn't seemed serious on its own. But paper cuts can become infected if left untreated. Mine had festered into something that threatened to consume everything I'd built. What's next? I asked. Security, Anthony said. Tonight, change every password you have. Banking, email, social media, anything Logan might know or guess. Order new cards. Set up 2-factor authentication on your accounts. He handed me a typed list of instructions. I've outlined the steps. If you need help, call me. I folded the list carefully and tucked it into my purse. And the power of attorney? I asked. He still expects me to sign it. Anthony's eyes were steady. Do you want to sign it? No, I said. The word came easily now. Then don't, he said. You are not obligated to sign any legal document, especially one that surrenders your autonomy. Outside, the air felt different, sharper, cleaner. I stood on the sidewalk with a folder of carbon copies and a plan, the weight of the last 3 years measured and named. $17,000, the price of trust, apparently. As I drove home, I thought about the next steps. The practical ones were clear: passwords, accounts, security. But there were other steps, harder ones, that Anthony's list didn't cover. Steps that would take me away from the person I'd been, the mother who always said yes, who always found a way, who kept the peace at any cost. At home, the emptiness greeted me like an old friend. The air mattress on the floor, the single chair at the kitchen table, the clock ticking patiently on the shelf. I sat down and looked at the carbon copies one more time, at my signature growing firmer with each letter. Veronica Adams, Veronica Adams, Veronica Adams. A name I'd almost forgotten belonged to me. Monday evening, I spread Anthony's instruction sheet across my kitchen table and opened my laptop. The bank's website greeted me with familiar blue and white, a screen I'd seen 100 times before but never truly examined. How often had I logged in just to check my balance, never questioning the transactions scrolling down the page? I navigated to the security settings and began the process. New password, not Logan's birthday or our old address or any of the combinations I'd used for years. Something new. Something he wouldn't guess. I enabled 2-factor authentication, linking it to my phone. Now, every login would require both my password and a code sent directly to me. My money would answer only to my command. The customer service representative who answered my call was named Diane. She didn't ask why I needed new cards, just confirmed my identity with questions only I would know the answers to. We'll deactivate your current cards immediately, she said. The new ones will arrive in 3 to 5 business days. Thank you, I said, relief warming my voice. And I'd like to check for any other accounts linked to my name or social security number. There was a pause, the sound of typing. I'm not seeing anything else, Mrs. Adams. Just your checking and savings. Good, I said, though we both knew the risk. Damage had already been done elsewhere. After hanging up, I moved to the credit bureau's websites. Anthony had listed them in order, with instructions for placing fraud alerts and credit freezes at each one. The process was tedious: forms to fill out, identity to verify, explanations to give. But with each submission confirmation, another door closed between my son and my finances. By midnight, I'd secured what I could. My accounts were mine again. My credit was frozen. The stolen cards were dead. I shut my laptop and looked at the clock, almost 1 a.m., and I wasn't tired. The kitchen felt different now, as if the air itself had changed density. I made tea and sat with it, watching steam curl into the empty room. For the first time in days, I let myself feel the grief, not just for the money taken, but for the trust broken. The years I'd spent making sure Logan had everything he needed, only to discover he'd been taking what I never offered. I will not sign power of attorney, I said to the empty kitchen. The clock ticked, marking the rhythm of my resolve. I will not sign power of attorney. I said it again in the morning as I dressed for work, said it on my lunch break. Said it driving home Tuesday evening. The words became a shield, a mantra, a boundary line drawn in my own voice. On Wednesday, Anthony called. The disputes are in motion, he said. I've requested IP logs for the online applications, payment history, all documentation they have. The credit card company and utility have already responded they're initiating fraud investigations. And the loan? I asked. That one may take longer, Anthony said. But we've stopped the collections process for now. No more calls from Steve. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen, suddenly aware of the silence around me. No television from the living room. No footsteps overhead. No dishes in the sink that I hadn't used myself. Just the clock, ticking steadily on the shelf, measuring moments that belonged only to me. For 30 years, I'd been Logan's mother first and Veronica second. I'd measured my worth in his achievements, my success in his comfort. Now, I found myself rediscovering the woman who existed before motherhood had consumed her. The woman who knew her own mind, who could stand alone if she had to. My phone pinged with a notification. One of the credit bureaus had received my fraud alert. Another pinged the bank confirming my new security settings were active. Small victories, electronic and bloodless, but mine. The clock ticked on. No longer a countdown to Logan's next demand, but a steady pulse of minutes that were my own to use as I chose. I picked up my phone again and scrolled to Logan's name. No calls since Monday. No texts asking where I was or what I'd decided about the papers. Just silence, the kind that comes before a storm. Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a notification I almost ignored. Sophie from church had tagged me in a comment. Odd Sophie, rarely used social media. I opened the app and froze. Logan had posted an hour earlier. Difficult situation with my mom. She's becoming unstable, selling off her belongings without telling anyone, emptying her house. We're stepping in to help manage her declining faculties, but she's lashing out. Prayers appreciated during this hard time. Family first. The post already had dozens of reactions, little hearts and sad faces floating beneath words that twisted my reality into something unrecognizable. The comments were worse. Praying for you, man. Aging parents are so hard. You're doing the right thing. Sometimes they need help whether they want it or not. Family first always. Then Peter, Logan's friend since high school. She's always been like this. Always been like what? I wanted to ask. A woman who worked double shifts? Who kept food on the table? Who paid for your graduation party, Peter, when your own parents couldn't afford it? My hands shook as I took screenshots, one after another. Each comment, each lie. When I finished, I texted them all to Anthony with a simple message. This is happening now. His response came quickly. Don't respond. Save everything. We'll talk tomorrow. I set my phone down, but the words followed me through the empty rooms of my house. Unstable, declining, lashing out. The language of dismissal, of diagnosis, without credentials. The easy narrative of a concerned son and his difficult mother. Friday morning, I arrived at Anthony's office before work, the screenshots printed and organized in a folder. He reviewed them silently, his expression carefully neutral. This changes things, he said finally. He's taken it public. What does that mean for us? I asked. Anthony leaned back in his chair. It means we have a choice to make. We can still handle this, privately send a demand letter, negotiate terms, keep it between the parties involved. He tapped the printouts. Or we can file a civil suit and put the facts under sunlight. What's the difference? A demand letter gives him a chance to make this right without public consequences. A civil suit puts everything on record, the fraud, the financial abuse, and now this character assassination. Anthony met my eyes directly. If we go public, you lose narrative control. You also regain it. I looked down at the printouts again, my son's public declaration that I was losing my mind, that I needed to be managed like a wayward child. The comments affirming his version of reality. The story they were all telling about me while I sat silently in my empty house. I want my name back, I said, on paper. Anthony nodded. Then we file. Adams versus Adams. The courthouse was a limestone building with wide steps and tall columns, a place designed to make ordinary people feel small. I followed Anthony through security, down echoing hallways, into an office with rows of filing cabinets. The clerk who took our paperwork barely looked up, as if fraud between family members was the most ordinary thing in the world. As we walked back to the car, Anthony outlined what would come next. The gathering of evidence, the service of papers, the potential for depositions. "This won't be quick," he warned. "And it won't be easy." "I know," I said. "He'll have a chance to respond," Anthony continued. "To contest the allegations. To hire his own attorney." I nodded, picturing Logan's face when he received the summons. Would he be shocked? Angry? Or had he been expecting this all along, the moment when his mother finally stopped saying yes? "How long?" I asked. "Until service?" "A few days." "Until resolution?" "Could be months." As Anthony drove me back to my car, I watched the town scroll past the grocery store, where I'd taught Logan to compare prices, the park where he'd learned to ride a bike, a high school, where I'd attended every parent-teacher conference alone. Places that held our history, now overlaid with a different story. My phone pinged with another notification. Logan had posted again. "Update. The situation with Mom is worse than we thought. She's refusing to accept our help. We're exploring options. Number elder care, number family crisis." The hashtags made my stomach turn. As if my life were a trending topic, my autonomy up for public debate. I took another screenshot and sent it to Anthony, then turned my phone off. The story he was telling had power, but so did the truth. Saturday arrived with thick, muggy air. The kind of heat that sticks to your skin and makes movement feel like wading through syrup. I'd spent the morning reviewing Anthony's folder of evidence. Screenshots, bank statements, credit reports neatly organized with colored tabs. The facts laid bare in black and white, a story told in numbers and dates. Just after noon, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I saw Logan's blue sedan, the one I'd helped him pick out 3 years earlier. He sat behind the wheel for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, before finally opening the door and stepping out. Alone, no Sarah this time. I stood and moved to the front door, watching through the peephole as he approached. His shoulders were squared, his jaw set. He didn't knock, just reached for the doorknob directly, the familiar gesture of someone who has always believed in his right to enter. I pulled the door open before he could turn the key, then stepped into the frame, filling the threshold with my body. Logan's hand froze midair, his eyes widening in surprise. "Mom," he said, recovering quickly. "We need to talk." I didn't step aside, didn't invite him in, just stood there, one hand on the doorframe, the other on the edge of the door, ready to close it if necessary. "I'm not here to fight," he said, his voice softening into the tone he used when he wanted something. "I'm here to make this right. You can start," I said, "by returning every cent you took. Every cent, Logan, or I go to the police." His face paled. "What are you talking about?" "The $1,200 from the ATM on Riverside. The Hammers and Home credit card with $3,000 in charges. The electricity account for your house on Cypress Avenue. The $5,000 loan from Quick Loan." I listed them without looking at my notes. The amounts burned into my memory. $17,000 over 3 years. Taken from accounts you opened in my name. Logan's expression cycled through shock, denial, calculation, settling finally on wounded innocence. "Mom, don't mom me," I said, the voice of my own mother flowing through me, the women who'd taught me to be both soft and steel. "You opened accounts in my name. You took my money. You lied in public about my mind. You will not cross this threshold until it's paid back, and you have written the truth down where you told the lie." He stared past me into the bare living room, as if searching for allies or witnesses. Finding none, he shifted tactics. "I was going to pay it all back," he said. "I've been meaning to talk to you about this. It was just temporary to help us get established." 3 years isn't temporary," I said. "You've always helped us before," he countered, a note of accusation entering his voice. "I didn't think you'd mind. It was for your own good anyway. You weren't using that money." The phrase hung between us, absurd in its audacity. I met his eyes directly. "The last time someone told me that," I said, "I learned it wasn't." His expression hardened. "This is ridiculous. I'm your son. Let me in so we can discuss this like adults. We are discussing it, I said, from opposite sides of this threshold. Logan's control slipped then, his face flushed, his voice rising. You're embarrassing yourself and me. Do you know what people are saying? That you've lost it, that you need help. People who believe the story you're telling, I said. Because it's true, he snapped. Look at you living in an empty house, making wild accusations. If you'd just signed the power of attorney like I asked, so you could access what's left? I asked quietly. His silence was answer enough. It's not too late. He tried again, voice suddenly gentle. We can still fix this, just the two of us. No lawyers, no drama. I'll help you get your furniture back. Things can go back to normal. Normal. The word struck me as both tempting and hollow. Normal had been him taking. Normal had been me giving. Normal had led us here, to this doorway, to this broken trust. Go home, Logan, I said. Talk to your own lawyer. The papers have been filed. Papers? What papers? His voice cracked. Mom, what did you do? What I should have done 3 years ago, I said, and began to close the door. His hand shot out to stop it. You can't do this. We're family. I held the door firm. Yes, which is why it hurts so much. For a moment, we stood frozen in opposition, his hand pushing, mine resisting. Then something in his eyes changed. He withdrew his hand slowly, as if only now realizing where the line was. Drawn. I closed the door with a gentle click and turned the lock. Through the peephole, I watched him stand there, staring at the barrier between us as if he couldn't believe its existence. Finally, he turned and walked back to his car, movements stiff with rage. When the sound of his engine faded, I leaned against the door and let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. There was no triumph in this moment. No victory shout. Just oxygen filling lungs that had been shallow for too long. Sunday brought silence, but Monday unleashed a storm. My phone began buzzing before dawn, Logan's name flashing on the screen. I let each call go to voicemail, watching the notifications stack up like bricks in a wall between us. During my lunch break at the hospital, I finally listened, phone pressed tight against my ear in the quiet of the records room. Mom, it's me. Logan's first message, voice controlled but strained. This is a misunderstanding. Call me back so we can clear this up. The second, I didn't mean to use your accounts without permission. I was going to pay you back. We just got in over our heads with the house and the renovations. Please, call me. Third, Sarah is scared, Mom. She's crying. Is this what you want? To tear our family apart? By the fourth, his composure had cracked. You're embarrassing me. You're making this worse. People are asking questions. What am I supposed to tell them? The fifth, after midnight. This is what I get? After everything I've done for you? After checking on you every week? After making sure you weren't alone? This is how you repay me? I forwarded them all to Anthony and returned to work, filing medical records with hands that no longer shook. Each patient file a life distilled to data points and diagnoses paper proof of existence. Like my own life now, reduced to account numbers and transaction records, evidence of violation. That evening, I checked Logan's social media page again. The tone had shifted. His posts about my mental decline had stopped. Comments had thinned to generic expressions of support. Several early commenters had deleted their contributions. A few mutual acquaintances had messaged me privately. Veronica, is everything okay? If you need anything. I always wondered about those renovations. Call me if you want to talk. I believe you. Those 3 words. I believe you brought unexpected tears. How long had I lived without that simple affirmation? Tuesday afternoon, Anthony called. The hardware store has responded, he said. They've provided the application details for the credit card. It was completed online, from an IP address that traces back to your son's home. The signature was digital, just a checkbox and your name typed in. What about the loan? Quick loan requires in-person signing, but their security is laughable. They've sent over the application and signature card. It's clearly not your handwriting, looks like someone traced it on a bright surface. We're having it analyzed formally. And the electricity account? That's our smoking gun, Anthony said, his voice lifting slightly. The utility company forwarded the email used to set up service. It came from Sarah's personal account. She explicitly requested the bill be in your name. claiming you were helping them get established in their new home. I closed my eyes, picturing Sarah at her computer, typing my name, my social security number, my date of birth information gleaned from years of proximity, of trusted access to my life and home. We've compiled everything, Anthony continued. The unauthorized withdrawals, the fraudulent accounts, the traced signature, the utility email, the social media defamation. It's substantial. What now? I asked. Now, we draft our settlement proposal. I suggest $17,000 in restitution, the exact amount taken, plus $5,000 in damages and legal fees. I nodded, then remembered he couldn't see me. Yes, that's fair. There's one more thing, Anthony said. I recommend we include a non-negotiable clause requiring a public written admission of the fraud posted to the same social media feed where he made the defamatory statements. My heart quickened. He'll never agree to that. Then he can explain himself in open court, Anthony said simply. His choice. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, the clock ticking steadily on the shelf. The settlement wasn't about the money, though I needed it, especially now. It was about truth, about consequences, about my name, in public, cleared of the shadows he had cast. My phone buzzed with a text. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, the first direct contact since that night in my kitchen. Veronica. I'm sorry things have gotten so out of hand. Logan's not himself. He didn't mean for this to happen. We can work this out privately, as a family. Please. The message struck a hollow note. Not I'm sorry we took your money. Not I'm sorry I put utilities in your name. Just sorry things had gotten out of hand. As if the situation were a spilled drink, an accident no one could have prevented. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that the settlement wouldn't say more clearly. The clock continued its steady rhythm, marking time as evidence accumulated and the truth took shape. Each tick a small justice, each talk a step toward reclaiming what was mine. 2 weeks passed in a holding pattern of legal exchanges. Anthony forwarded the settlement offer. Logan's hastily retained attorney responded with counteroffers that slowly inched toward our terms. The restitution amount remained the sticking point, not the money itself, but the public admission clause. He's willing to pay $15,000 if we drop the public statement requirement, Anthony reported during our Thursday call. No, I said. The money isn't enough. I agree, Anthony said. I've already declined. The following Monday, Anthony called again. They've requested a meeting. Logan wants to review the evidence. Himself. The conference room at Anthony's office felt too small when Logan entered, his attorney a step behind. He wouldn't meet my eyes as they took seats across the table, but I studied him openly, this man I'd raised, now a stranger in a button-down shirt with nervous hands. Anthony slid the evidence packet across the table without preamble. Everything is here. Bank records, credit applications, IP address logs, the utility setup email, signature analysis, the social media posts. For 40 minutes, Logan and his attorney paged through the documents in silence. I watched the color drain from my son's face as he saw the evidence laid bare. The utility email from Sarah's account, the ATM camera still showing his face at the Riverside Drive withdrawal, the side-by-side comparison of my signature with the clumsy forgery on the loan application. His attorney whispered something. Logan shook his head. More whispers. Finally, Logan looked up, not at me, but at Anthony. What are the terms again? Full restitution of $17,000. Additional $5,000 for damages and legal fees. A public statement acknowledging the unauthorized access and misrepresentation posted to your social media account where the defamatory statements were made. Logan's jaw tightened. His attorney leaned in again, but Logan waved him off. I'll sign. 2 days later, my phone pinged with a bank notification. Deposit received, $22,000. I stared at the number. The accumulation of 3 years of violations now returned in a single electronic transfer. It felt both enormous and inadequate money restored, but trust still broken beyond repair. An hour later, Anthony texted, "It's posted." I opened my social media app and navigated to Logan's page. At the top, time stamped 5 minutes earlier. Over the past 3 years, I accessed my mother's accounts and opened services in her name without authorization. These actions were wrong. I apologize for the harm and the misrepresentations I made about her. I am making full restitution. Simple sentences. No excuses. No emotion. Just facts. The truth laid out in black and white for the same audience that had received his lies. The comments section remained empty. No hearts, no sad faces, no quick affirmations. Several people who had piled on with support earlier had deleted their comments. A single response from someone I didn't know. Accountability matters. I didn't feel the victory I'd expected. There was no rush of vindication, no desire to respond or pile on. Instead, I felt something quieter, the relief of setting down a heavy load carried too long. I took a screenshot of the post, then printed it. This paper, I folded carefully and placed in the folder, with my dispute letters and settlement agreement, a paper halo replacing a scar. That evening, I walked through my empty house one final time. The clock on the kitchen shelf, the air mattress in the bedroom, the single chair at the table. I touched the walls, the door frames, the window sills that had witnessed 30 years of my life. Then I packed what remained. My choir robes, my mother's Bible, the quilt Zoe and I had stitched that summer she was 11, and a handful of stones from the garden I'd tended for decades. My name was mine again. On paper, in truth, in full. The coastal town of Bay Ridge sits 2 hours east of my old life. Small enough that shopkeepers learn your name by your second visit. Large enough that strangers don't ask why you came. My rental cottage stands 3 blocks from the water. White clapboard with blue shutters and a porch just big enough for a chair facing the horizon. Inside, I've built a life measured in chosen things. A second-hand couch with faded flowers but good bones. A small kitchen table that seats 4 but usually holds only 1. The ticking clock on a shelf where it marks time for me, not against me. These modest belongings fill the rooms differently than the things I left behind, not as barriers or bulwarks, but as gentle companions in a quieter life. On Sundays, I walk to a little church with blue-painted pews and stained glass that turns the morning light into jewels across the floorboards. The congregation is small, mostly retirees and young families, but the choir director's face lit up when I mentioned I sang alto. "We're desperate for an alto," he said. And now, each week I stand between Eleanor, who taught 3rd grade for 40 years, and Daphne, who moved here after her husband died. Our voices blend into something larger than ourselves. I drive back to my old town once a month to check the P.O. box I've kept. Bills have dwindled. The disputed accounts are closed. The $22,000 sits mostly untouched in a new bank account with my name alone on the signature card. Sometimes it feels like blood money, other times like justice. Mostly, it feels like a future I didn't expect to have one with choices. Last week, I ran into Anthony at the grocery store. He was buying oranges, examining each one with the same careful attention he'd given my case. "How's the sea?" he asked, smiling. "Honest," I said. "The tide comes in. The tide goes out. It doesn't pretend." He nodded, understanding more than I'd said. "People ask if I'll reconcile with Logan and Sarah." My sister called from Arizona, their first conversation in years, to suggest family counseling. A cousin sent a text about forgiveness and second chances. Andrew from the hospital mentioned that Logan had asked for my new address. I tell them I wish them well-being. I tell them I've found a different definition of mother that includes self-respect. I tell them sometimes love requires a locked door. The money helped, of course it did, but it wasn't the point. The point was my name, my boundary, my say. The point was refusing to hand over my paycheck or my story to someone else's entitlement. I used to think survival was about staying. Now I think it might be about leaving when staying would cost you yourself. From my porch, I watch the unfriend. Tide's patient rhythm, in and out, taking and giving, constant and changing all at once. At 61, I've learned to live with this same rhythm, to know what to keep, what to release, when to stand firm, when to flow. What he didn't know was that the woman who emptied her own house could fill it again with peace this time, with space, with a life measured not in what was taken, but in what she chose to keep.